Hi everyone, it's your favourite Atomic Blonde here, bringing you my review of the Sandman. So just to say up front, I've never read the source material of Sandman, but I do have the Audible and listened to the Audible a while ago and sort of refreshed myself with that. So I'm very familiar with the original source material and the story. Obviously with the Audible, it does describe what some of the characters look like. But for me, I think some of the controversy around the shows with the race swapping and the gender swapping, wasn't as big a factor because I was listening to the Audible. I'll comment on some of those as we go. What I will say is that it's very true to the source material. Obviously, any adaptation, they've sort of stripped out some of the stuff that's not as relevant to the Rose and the Vortex storyline per se. So I can see why they've been removed. But what they've done really well is keep the backbone of the story and really sort of tight to the source material. It doesn't kind of go off on tangents. So if you know the source material, there's not really going to be any surprises in here in terms of where the story goes. I think the surprises or the things people react to, like I say, they have stripped out some of the chapters, and they've also some of the lines or roles are being done by other people in the story and not from the source material. So let's start with some pros. As I said, it sticks very much to the story. I think the world building is really good. The CGI in the main is very good. There's a couple of parts where it's a little bit iffy, and you can clearly see they're standing in front of a green screen. But generally, even from the trailer, you can see that the size and scale of what they've tried to build in a sort of 10-episode TV show. So I thought that was very good. In the main, again, most of the acting is good. There's a few weak links in the chain that I'll go into, but generally I thought all the casts were very good, despite some of the controversies. Some are better than others. So I think overall Netflix has done a relatively good job. It's a very difficult source material to develop. The story does sort of move around quite a lot, and lots of different characters and lots of interactions and storylines and how they all intertwine together. So they have managed to keep that feeling going and producing a coherent series. I think it could have been quite easy to kind of get lost and a bit meandering, but they've done a really good job of tightening it and keeping it on track. But saying that, sort of, going into the cons, I think the first episode is great. And then sort of 2, 3, and 4 are a bit slower. And I was struggling a little bit. It was a little bit ploddy to get through. But I think Neil Gaiman's work can be like that anyway. I mean, I've read American Gods, which is a great book, but it is hard going. It's a real sort of slog to get through, but it is a good book. So I think some of that's just the nature of Neil Gaiman, and you have to have those episodes in there so the story does make sense. So I think if you're one of these people that if the first couple of episodes haven't caught you, you will potentially walk away from this. But I think if you can stick with it, you might find it's actually an enjoyable series. Getting into sort of some of the fundamental changes. For me, the thing I found quite disappointing was that the original source material is much darker, is much grittier, sort of borderline horror in places. And this is sort of Sandman light, I would say. I mean, it does have enough darkness, and certainly the episode, which is called 24 or 24/7, I think they call it in this one. The diner, that's quite gritty. But the original source material, I don't think they could actually have made. It's each hour is a different set of torture really for the people in the diner, and the character is kind of killing them, bringing them back to life, bringing out their sort of truths. They maiming and hurting each other. At one point they have an orgy. And you know, one of the main characters chops her own head off. And so, I mean, they just couldn't have made it from the source material, but I think they could have leaned harder into the darker aspects of the story. But that episode actually is where it kind of kicks in and the story gets going. So to sort of give an overview of what happens. So the Sandman, he's the endless who looks after the dream world. So obviously when we go to sleep, we enter his realm. And the first episode starts in the sort of 1920s. And Charles Dance, who's creating it, is sort of into the occult. And he sets out to capture death. Given the time period, he's lost his son as some of the members of the cult, which they don't say, but I mean, you can pretty much guess that they must have lost him in the First World War. So they're trying to capture death so they can have their sons returned. Something goes wrong and they end up capturing Dream instead, the Sandman. And they take what they've referred to as his tools. So it's his dream dust, his red ruby, and his helmet. And he's basically imprisoned. And he stays there for 100 years. But he never speaks a word. He never tells them what they want to know, like how to get death or who he even is. Obviously, by the sort of end of the first episode, Dream manages to escape, which is you'd expect, although it'd be a very, very short series. And once he escapes, he goes back to the dream world and sees that everything's been destroyed because he's not been there. And he sets about repairing his kingdom and getting his tools back, which is the dream dust, the ruby, and his helmet. So this sort of takes him off on kind of an initial quest, and he finds out some demon has his helmet. Joanna Constantine got his dust, and the ruby is with John Dee, or his mother, it starts off as. Now, to say anybody that knows the source material, when this was originally written, it was part of the DC universe. All the DC stuff has been stripped out, so you can watch this without knowing who Dr. Destiny is, or the Injustice League, and all of those elements of it are all gone. Which might be disappointing to some people, and also the way that the Dr. D, or he's just called John D in this, looks is nothing like the character. He's just like normal human being. He's not skeletal or anything like that. But the characterization is done well. Also, Dr. D is sort of portrayed as sort of a bit damaged. He's in an asylum, again, not Arkham. Whereas obviously the character in the source material is really unhinged, very dark, very dangerous. So they kind of, again, it's Dr. D like. So anyway, he goes off on his quest. He goes to hell to get his helmet, where he obviously meets Lucifer. Anybody that's familiar with the Neil Gaiman world, the sort of TV series Lucifer, that's part of his creation. Same with Mazikeen. So they've actually cast Gwendolyn Christie, a lady, to play Lucifer. For me, this was the worst casting out of the whole show. The woman has no gravitas, no charm, no charisma, nothing that sort of makes you look and go, there's that je ne sais quoi, or that X factor, whatever that is around sort of someone who should be playing Lucifer. She's very dull. She's very flat. She just looks massively uncomfortable because, she's an older lady and she's kind of in these PVC outfits, and she just looks like she's sweating cobs. She just wants to get out of this outfit and get in and out of the scene as quickly as possible. And for me, I think it would have made much more sense to have cast Tom Ellis from the Lucifer series, or even if they do want a female Lucifer, fine. I don't really mind so much. But for me, if they do any recasting for season 2, if there is a season 2, get rid of that Lucifer. For me, she was absolutely shocking. Just no gravitas on screen whatsoever. No real chemistry. Yeah, I was really, really disappointed. And there's a challenge, and Sandman, I think fights Lucifer, but it's like a game of words kind of thing. There's no real action. But again, this is absolutely from the source material. Some people probably won't like it because it's a bit like, oh, is that it then? Because there's no big like sort of standoff fight like you see in like Marvel or something like that. But I think if they did do something like that, it'd probably be quite jarring against the rest of the series. It wouldn't really gel. It doesn't really fit with the style of the rest of the series. So again, I was quite happy that they kept that in, but I get why some people may not like it. Again, you know, cut a long story short, he wins, he gets his helmet and then moves on. He goes to Joanna Constantine. As we know, this is another race swap. Sex swap. It should be John Constantine. And Matt Ryan, who played the character in the Arrowverse, was brilliant at it. He was really, really good. They actually got someone, you know, English to play the character because he's meant to be from Liverpool, a Scouser. He's a bit of a cad, you know. He's on the side of good, but he has his flaws. He's, you know, has his own backstory and a bit damaged. With Joanna, they do kind of keep the same sort of backstory, and they show you some of the backstory, which is very similar to John. I didn't pick up that Jenna Coleman had a Liverpudlian accent at all. So I'm sure I've read some people say she did. I didn't think it sounded anything like it just sounds like Jenna Coleman being Jenna Coleman. Again, I mean, Jenna's a very, very good actress. But they've really just brought her in to play Clara Oswald from Doctor Who, but not the original Clara, the good Clara, as I call it, who was teamed up with Matt Smith. This is Clara 2.0, the obnoxious, sassy, I'm better than the Doctor Clara from Capaldi era. So, I mean, I get it. Say John Constantine is obnoxious. He is, like I say, you know, a bit of a cad. He's love him and leave him. He's not a nice man, but he's charming. So he's one of these kind of anti-heroes that, you know, he's not, you know, he will let people down, but you can't help but like him. And I don't know what it is with female writing right now, that when they try and do a female version of that, somehow they can never make the female character an asshole, but likable at the same time. They just always seem to be lacking that bit of charm, or that bit of, I don't know what you'd call it, but you know, that someone can be a rogue, the lovable rogue. They can't seem to write that for women, and I don't know why. So again, she just comes across as, I mean, she does a fair job, but she's just playing Clara basically. So anyway, she's left the sand at her ex-partner's house, Rachel, I think it is, and she basically just says she just walked out or left her, didn't give her any explanation. So she goes back to get it, but basically finds Rachel's dying. Rachel found the sand, she's in bed, and she's basically been in the dream world for too long, and she's like emaciated and basically has just been laying there like, starving to death. And they're able to take the sand back, and Dream helps her move on. But it's a bit of a lesson to Constantine to be sort of more responsible with the magics, etc. And he leaves and moves on, and then he basically goes to get the ruby. And this is where the story kind of really kicks off, and that's why I say the first few episodes are quite slow. So John Dee has the ruby, but he's changed it so it only works for him. So when Dream goes to get it, it actually backfires on him and knocks him unconscious, and basically takes the sort of last of his strength or power away, where he's been locked away for 100 years. And John's able to take the ruby and escape from the asylum. He hitches a ride with Rosemary. She's just a mother on her way home, I think it was. And again, this is another change. Rosemary's they're like sort of chatting away. And again, they kind of make John Dee, obviously he's scary. He sort of explains to her that he's killed people, but he only does it for like the sort of greater good. And obviously that's kind of freaking her out, which was actually a reasonable response. And And then they finally sort of she goes to get gas, or says, can we stop for gas? And she asks for help from the assistant. But John finds out, and then they get back in the car, and she's like very apologetic, but she's saying, look, I'm scared. And are you going to kill me? And he says no, and they just all basically get to the diner. And this is the difference, that basically, again, so he's John D. Light. He lets Rosemary go. He gives her the protection amulet, whereas in the source material, he sort of says, thank you so much for all your help, blah blah blah, and then shoots her dead. So then we get, say, to the diner episode, which I touched on at the start of the video. And again, the change here is he's talking about removing lies from the world, and if we didn't lie to each other, the world would be a better place. And he kind of lifts that from the diner, so they all sort of start speaking the truth, and things start to break down. You've got a couple. One's a woman who's a CEO of a company, and her trophy boyfriend. Again, that's very different to the source material. They were just a normal couple, and that very much there. She wears the trousers. He's a bit, overshadowed and henpecked, and he's basically cheating on her because he feels less valued, or not so much of a man because she won't let him be a man, kind of thing. So that's a very modern take on it that wasn't in the source material, and was a bit I didn't particularly like it that much. There's another guy in the diner who's going for an interview at a said company that she's CEO of. You've got Judy, who is and they make a big point that she is a lesbian. It's the same as source material. She's just split up with her girlfriend Donna. And it's all a bit because initially she's saying she's going to meet her on a date, and then Donna's not coming, and then the truth comes out that they've split up because Judy hit Donna. And so there's various scenarios going around. The waitress wants to be a writer, and looks at the people in the diner as kind of like sort of source material, and all her stories have happy endings because she knows when to stop the story. And this is something that's said, but it's actually said by John D in this instance to her. And so basically, say, as a course of 24 hours, they're kind of stuck in the diner. They can't leave, or when they go to leave, he makes it so they forget they were going to leave, and they basically replay coming back in, sitting down, ordering, so he can sort of play out over this time what would happen if they all know the truth. And again, it's definitely a scaled back version. I mean, some of the things in terms of one of them hammering his hand to the counter. They don't really explain why he does it in this version. In the source material, they do explain. They all start having sex separately as couples. You don't really get the orgy that you got in the source material, and obviously you don't really see anything. But they do end up sort of hurting themselves and maiming themselves and killing themselves until finally Dream arrives to stop him. John thinks he knows how to kill Dream and destroys the ruby, but actually the ruby is made from Dream and basically releases all his power, and Dream's able to get his power back, and again basically just returns John to the asylum. And then that's kind of the end of that episode. And then we go into Dream's feeling a bit lost. He's kind of done his quest. He's rebuilding his kingdom. He's not really sure what to do now. And this is where they have the episode with Death. Again, there was quite a bit of controversy around the hiring of the actress, Kirby Howell-Baptiste. I think she's done a very good job. She's a very good actress. Nothing wrong with how she portrayed Death. Again, I wasn't too bothered about the race swap. I think for me, where I thought the casting was actually off was Death is described as looking like 15 to 18, and the actress is mid-30s and looks, late 20s, early 30s. So I didn't really get why the age jump. Maybe they thought it was not appropriate for a 15 to 18-year-old to be seen with Dream. I don't know. But kudos to the actress though. She done a very good job. I liked how she portrayed Death, and I know this is probably one of the more controversial changes they've made. But again, it sort of explains Death and her role and how we shouldn't be afraid of death. And Dream follows her, and they go around, and she collects the souls of several people and helps them on their journey, and basically just lays into Dream and says, like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You've escaped, you've got your stuff back, you've got your realm back. If you want to do something, find something to do and go do it. So she gives him a good kick up the backside, which is really good. While this has all been happening, there's been a census happening in the dream world. Sort of find out that some of the inhabitants are no longer there. And one's a nightmare called Corinthian. He's always also featured in the early episodes, and he basically is a nightmare that's escaped and living in our world and is going around murdering people. The actor for that, Boyd Holbrook, is great. He portrays it really, really well. They've got that real coldness, but that sort of charm, that kind of, sort of Ted Bundy serial killer can talk you into your own death kind of thing. Portrayed absolutely excellently. And this is where we start also. So we've got this sort of storyline happening that he obviously wants to take Dream down. He doesn't want to go back. And this is where we start sort of seeing the introduction of a character called Rose Walker. Again, the actress that plays her is great. Again, another race swap, but the actress does a fine job. Again, though, they've made some fundamental changes that the mother's dies in this version, which kind of makes Rose on her own, rather where the mother stays alive in the original version. I don't know, again, they've tried to do this to make her more headstrong, more sassy, more independent. I'm not quite sure the reasoning behind that, because it does sort of put more of an edge on this version of the character Rose. I didn't really like, she's not as I'm struggling. She's not obnoxious, but she's borderline. She's kind of getting there, that she's very headstrong, and you can't tell me what to do. And she's basically looking for her long lost brother. I want my brother. Tell me where my brother is, and just rocks up and starts having a go at Dream. Who's this Lord of Dreams, and she just doesn't care, and she's just bullshit. That's the word, just bullshit. She's just going around, which in itself is okay. But again, there's a scene where she goes to see social services and basically just swears at the lady, and you're just like, well, I'm not sure that's that's really how you'd react. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame, I think, that they've done that. But otherwise, the story of Rose is very similar. How she gets her brother back is slightly different as well. They've done it so Corinthian gets the brother, whereas Dream, who gets the brother in the source, but it all still works. It all still hangs together. So they end up going to this hotel where they're meeting to get and there's this cereal convention, and it's basically, play on words. It's actually a serial killer convention, not a cereal convention. Where obviously Corinthian is like the guest speaker, and it all sort of plays out. And again, there's some differences here to the source material about how Dream ends up being there and rescuing Rose and capturing Corinthian. But he basically, gets Corinthian, sends him back, or basically deletes him, for lack of a better term. And he sort of says, I will rebuild you, and I won't make you so flawed next time. Kind of from there, this is where we really sort of find out that Rose is the vortex, or we know Rose is the vortex. So he thinks he's got to kill her. It basically transpires that her grandmother Unity should have been the vortex, but she was in the sleep sickness and asleep for a whole of her life, and she gave birth to a daughter while she was asleep, which is in the source material was like, well, hang on, she's asleep, so something dodgy's gone on there, but it's never really pushed past that point. And again, in this, they don't really push as to how she got pregnant if she's asleep. But basically, she gives birth, daughter's given up for adoption, and Rose is the great granddaughter. So Unity has the opportunity to take the power of the vortex from Rose, so Dream doesn't have to kill her. And Unity's an old lady, So she basically dies in her place. That's kind of more or less where the season ends. There's a little bit, a bit more sort of happy ending type stuff, that, you know, Rose and her brother live happily ever after, and they're living with some of their friends and who are introduced throughout this that I haven't really touched on. Again, their roles are kind of scaled back from the source material, but I used quite well in this to drive the story. So there's another, I think, 3 or 4 chapters in the source material that are kind of independent stories. They don't really have any bearing on the Rose story. So it kind of makes sense where they've finished this, that it's kind of rounds out the Rose, the Vortex story, and Sandman getting his kingdom back. If there is a season 2, whether it'll touch on those stories, I don't know. But I think it'll be quite different to this if they do those standalone stories. So anyway, overall, not a bad adaptation. As I say, for me, it's Sandman light. I think it should have been much darker, but I understand why they've not gone there. I think a lot of people who don't know the source material potentially wouldn't have enjoyed it if it was much darker. Say in the main, I've got no real issues with the swaps and the transgender character playing Desire. For me, that makes complete sense. The way it was described in the original source materials, or the Dream refers to Desire as he, she, them, or sister, brother. So, you know, and I think the actor that plays Desire has done a very good job. Yeah, I mean, overall, I do prefer the source material, but I do think this is a good adaptation. On Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's got a 86% rating, so pretty even from critics to audience. I personally wouldn't rate it that high. I think it's probably more sort of 70-80 for me. Well, sort of high 70s, 80 for me, just for the reasons that I've given. Like some of the casting I really didn't like, including like Dream. To be honest, I think visually he very much looks like Dream, but he's a little bit mumbly, a little bit monotone. Whereas in the Audible, it's James McAvoy who plays Dream, and obviously a very talented actor. And I know it's Audible, so there has to be much more acting or dramatization in the voice by the nature of Audible, but there is a lot more tone to James McAvoy and what emotions Dream's feeling. You don't really get a sense of that from Tom Sturridge. He's just kind of very one level, you know, whether he's happy, sad, annoyed, it's all just very, very monotone. So I didn't massively take to Tom Sturridge. He's just a bit sort of moody, just sort of slopping around, murmuring quite a bit of a plank, which is disappointing for the lead actor. But, you know, again, it doesn't massively detract. If you're not aware of any other version of this, I think he probably comes across fine. But again, I think, you know, as the lead, he's probably lacking a little bit of gravitas, and I think he needs a bit more of that. If there's a season 2, you know, he's meant to be the lead of the show. And for me, you know, Corinthian comes across much more as the lead with his portrayal and characterization. So I'd say worth a watch overall. If you're into your sort of fantasy, supernaturally sort of genres, if you don't like anything like that, you're going to absolutely loathe this. Like I say, it's a bit slow in parts, but does eventually kick in. Visually very stunning. For me, definitely room for improvement. I think there should be some recasting for the next season, but, you know, give it a go. I did enjoy it overall. Yeah, enough to want to see it and finish it, which is always a bonus. So yeah, check it out, and hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, obviously, and you'll get more of these sort of reviews. Thank you to those who have already subscribed to the channel. It means a lot. Thank you very much, and I will continue to tell you what I think. So thanks very much. Speak soon. Bye bye.